welcome to Mac Gamecast, episode 8, a podcast where we talk all about Mac games and related things. With me today is Ted. How you doing, Ted?
Good. I'm doing good.
Great. And Casper, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. I'm sworn to my neck in work, but I'm pushing through and I'm enjoying it still, so that's good.
Great. Thank you for making the time to be here. Sam has still been busy. Lily was going to be here, and then the army sent some saboteurs and gave her a bunch of work and stuff, so she couldn't be here, which is unfortunate. Fun fact. Outside, I believe, episode 1, the episode with her in it is our highest downloaded episode. Coincidence, or who knows? That was a really...
loves her.
Yeah, it was a really long episode where we talked about what kind of gamer, or I think that was it. Yeah, it was like the hour 45-minute one. Most downloaded. Interesting. So clearly we need Lily back to give our numbers a boost, you know? So today the main topic is going to be native versus non-native gaming, which is a really interesting thing in the Mac space. It's been around for a very long time. There's probably, I don't know, who was the first person to start tinkering around with emulators or Wine or virtual machines, or of course, when Apple switched to Intel chips, Boot Camp became possible, and that was the sole thing. And of course, now, these days, streaming is also fairly popular, whether it's Geforce Now, mostly Geforce Now, but there's also Google Stadia, Amazon's coming out with Luna, there's Xbox Game Pass, there's all kinds of streaming stuff, so it's a pretty big space. We've talked a lot on the show about Mac gaming in general, state of Mac gaming, etc., and I feel like now more than ever, non-native gaming is actually becoming very relevant for a variety of reasons. As we've talked about previously on the show, native ports have slowed down, seemingly largely due to COVID. Late 2019 is kind of when last things were coming out in any regularity from the big AAA stuff. And of course, now with the switch to Apple Silicon, that's been slowed down even more. And we've learned a few interesting facts about game porting lately in Steam and x86 and stuff like that. In terms of your guys's, and also just preferences, we've talked about that, I think, on episode 2 or 3, I forget which one, just what kind of games you like to play and how do you like to use your Mac in all kinds of ways. I would like to define one thing, though, in terms of the discussion, because I think at this point you could claim, well, anything running through Rosetta 2 on an M1 is a non-native game. So I just want to say I'm just going to count games that run through Rosetta as native for the purposes of the discussion, because what I mean is by non-native is something you actually have to go and configure or pay for a service or install Boot Camp or configure Crossover or Wine or whatever tinkering you're doing. If you can just download the game and play it on your Mac, I'm considering that native for the purposes of this discussion. I understand technically that may not be true, but I don't want to get tied up with games that actually just run on Mac fine and don't require other further effort to just play them, basically.
Right, we can just consider it software native, right? It runs natively on the Mac OS software platform, but it may not be bytecode binary compatible directly with the ARM chip, but through Rosetta and the Mac OS software ecosystem that already exists, it's software native.
Thank you. Casper to the rescue. Thank you. So what Mr. Macwright put out a cool video recently, earlier this week, I think, Monday or Tuesday, on why more games aren't coming, AAA games, where all the AAA games are M1 Macs, or Silicon Macs, I think was the title, paraphrasing. And I think maybe we all watched it, or a few of us watched it anyway. And he has some contacts with some devs, Alvarez, these guys who really are part of Larian Studios, the guys who do Divinity Original Sin and Baldur's Gate 3. I saw a Larian dev comment. They're basically just part of the team at this point, but they're the Mac branch of the team. Anyway, Mr. Macwright, Stewie, aka Stewie, worked with them to get some info and details. And the interesting thing was... to get a native M1, because now of course we're talking about Intel native and M1 or Silicon native, two different things at this point. It can't be done on Steam right now because Steam's forcibly injecting these x86 I don't know, DLLs or packages or whatever the word is. So that was
dynamic libraries, yeah.
Right, the libraries. So that was an interesting detail to me. I hadn't thought about it, even though I had a Silicon Mac for quite a while. So purportedly, the only way to get a true Silicon native app is, well, not on Steam. The Mac App Store, or maybe a standalone download. I guess I have no idea what's going on with Epic. They don't seem to have a lot of Mac ports in terms of...
Nope.
Like a lot of the games that are for Mac on Steam are also on Epic, but do not have a Mac version, which is pesky. So that's interesting. But that was an interesting detail that I learned from that video. And, you know, we're fairly optimistic around here on the future of Mac gaming and Silicon and stuff like that. But from a developer standpoint, there are some hurdles. And we had Chris on here and, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name. Who's the last guy we had on who did the visual novels?
Titus?
Yes, thank you. I'm terrible. I've even been listening to their Dark Future Dice podcast, which is highly entertaining. I definitely recommend it. I've been listening to it while I drive. It's great. It's great. And he had run into some issues with Steam achievements on Mac specifically, and some oddness like that. So there's these little hurdles for Mac devs. So I guess, do you remember, Casper, from Mr. Mac Wright's video? Was it a Valve or Apple issue with these libraries, or was there no conclusion?
That's entirely on Valve. So as soon as Valve updates the Steam dynamically linked libraries, the DLLs or the dialyps on the Mac, DLL is a Windows term, but it's essentially the same thing, right? So as soon as Valve updates the libraries they ship with Steam to have universal versions, and they'll probably also have to do some code changes because the Steam loader loads the game files instead of relying on standard loading mechanisms. So they probably have some code there they need to change. But as soon as Valve does that, native Apple Silicon games would be possible through Steam. But as it stands, the only way to really get a Apple Silicon native executable on Steam is through a bit of fiddlery where you have an x86 Intel architecture launcher that Steam then launches, that you can then launch your Apple Silicon native version.
Right. I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing it up. That's a great point. Right. And of course, not everyone's going to want to run around adding an extra launcher to their game and rah. And some games come with them.
I also think that if you do that, you actually can't get Steam achievements, or there's some Steam integration. Maybe it's just the overlay thing when you click Shift Tab or whatever you set it up. Yes. But some Steam integration things will
because it's
will not
decoupled a bit, right, with this third-party overlay or third-party launcher. That's interesting. A lot of games seem to have them inherently. Like Feral, I don't know. Like every game Feral Interactive devs has a launcher. And it seems to have like forever, like going back 10 years or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I haven't played literally every game they've put out, but I've played a substantial amount of them. In some cases, I know the launchers are there. Like the Total War games always seem to have launchers, whether on PC or Mac. So I do want to. I haven't reached out to Feral anytime recently, but I would like to try and get them on. It'd be very interesting to hear their thoughts on this kind of stuff. The Intel. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. In your guys' experience in the native versus non-native thing, where does it sit for you? Like Ted, I know you've been playing, for example, more Windows games lately with your family and things like that. But like, how often, I guess, do you use non-native gaming versus native gaming in your like experience?
It all depends on what hit. Right, like you said, there's very few AAA games that have come up on the Mac side, so I'll play them. And I think, I mean, to give you an honest answer, I think it's maybe about 50-50 right now. Sometimes I'll get into an urge that, there's like 3 games I have going on the Windows side and 2-3 games on the Mac side right now, and it depends on what's pulling me in. And I'll get like a couple of days ago I was playing the Mac version of Metro Exodus, and I played and finally, I finished for the day. I guess it was one of those rainy days where I had nothing better to do with myself, and But then after that, it was like, man, I'm tired. I'll go over to the Windows side for a couple sessions. And yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. It's about back and forth. And I play, like when I play World of Warcraft, I play the Mac version with a PC friend, which is really cool. And but a lot of the games I've been playing with my other friend, my brother, they're Windows only, and I can't get a Mac version. There's not a whole lot of cooperative games out there. I'm not big into army simulation ones, the military stuff. So it's more. I'm looking more into the science fiction genre, and most of the ones we've been finding there's just nothing on the Mac side, which is a real shame.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good genre. How about you, Casper? What's your sort of gaming? How do you feel about this native versus non-native stuff?
Well, I think that the first priority is to play the games you want to play. And if that involves going to Windows on boot camp or some other method of playing the game, then I'll do that, right? But if I can stick to macOS, I'll do that because it's where I'm doing all my productivity work, and it's the environment I've already got loaded up, and I can easily multitask between different things. I can listen to Apple Music in the background if it's a game where I'm not listening to story like Civilization or something, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I also have this threshold of how much performance difference I'm willing to accept. So I found that at least on my setup, Civilization 6 has too big a performance delta on macOS versus Windows. So I'll actually boot Windows for that game, even though it has a Mac port.
Right.
But if I run the Mac version, I can play it at like 1080p maybe. If I run the Windows version, I can put everything to max and play it in 5K and get 50, 60 FPS, right? And
I guess I thought, sorry to interject, I thought Aspire had better optimization than that. Though I haven't played a Civ game since Civ 5 when they sent me a review copy like 7 years ago or whatever.
I mean, it could be just a factor of my hardware specifically, and it might run better on other hardware. Though I have a powerful Mac, but it might just be that it's not well optimized for my GPU or something.
I didn't mean to divert you, but I want to make a note to like investigate that. For myself, I'm just curious. Yeah,
I think you and I have very similar hardware though, so it's probably going to run similar for you as it does for me.
That's what I'm also curious about. I'll do that some other time. I'm glad you. Yeah, go ahead.
But in the past, I've also had okay experiences with Aspire's ports. So it's not a dig at them or anything. It's just that port specifically, for me at least, doesn't run very well. So
right,
yeah, absolutely. I'll boot Windows for that. Also, a fun little side note on that: I've often in the past played Civilization games with my brother, and he plays on Windows machines, and I've played on Mac machines. And there's this version discrepancy thing, right? Where often the Mac version, it comes out when there's an update a few days, maybe even weeks later sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can only have play between the same version of the game. Right. You can do cross-platform with Windows and macOS, but it needs to be the same version of the game itself. So sometimes we can play fine where I'm on macOS and he's on Windows. And sometimes when you try and connect to each other, the game will go, oh, version discrepancy, you need to wait on an update. And there is no update because it's not been released on the macOS side yet. And that's just annoying, right? And if I'm on my desktop, my iMac, I can just boot into Windows because, well, I've got Boot Camp installed on that. But I don't run Boot Camp on my laptop because the SSD isn't that big on it, and I don't want to log around an extra SSD. And I need macOS on it for my work, and I just don't want to carry Windows around on it. So it's kind of annoying when I take my laptop to my brother's and go, oh, let's play Civilization. It's like, oh, version discrepancy.
version mismatch. I ran into that.
That's the wording.
Yeah, I ran into that a fair amount back in the day with Borderlands 2, also by Aspire.
Right.
And to their credit, they did. I think the Mac version was out like 2 weeks after the PC one. It was very quick. Like they were bringing games out pretty snappily. compared to Feral back then, who was doing them often several months or even years later. So that was cool. But same thing, I had a few PC friends and Mac friends from the Inside Mac Games forums or whatever. But every now and then, or at some point, I think I was trying to play with some just random people, and version mismatch. Or same thing like you, a buddy of mine at the time had a PC laptop. He had like a Mac desktop PC laptop, but it would come by. We were big Borderlands fans. We got into Borderlands 1 together back when it came out and everything. Same thing. Oh, we sit down to play and like version mismatch, and we're like, back then I don't think I had Boot Camp loaded up or whatever. So we decided to okay, let's play something else. It seems to be better these days, but still some games for sure. And I think this is an interesting segue into something like the streaming market, as it were, by which I mean, rather than downloading and installing and playing a game on either Windows or Mac OS, you're using a streaming service to simply log in, click on the game you want to play, and load it up and have it stream. So all you need there basically is a good internet connection. I think 50 Mbps is recommended or higher. It can go as low as 25, but you get less performance or less quality. So the longest one I've been using is Geforce Now, NVIDIA's Geforce Now, or GFN for short. I've been using it for like the last 3 or 4 years. It was in beta for a long time, and it was just free. It was just in beta. And then they released it, and then, of course, they started charging for it. If you were a beta user, they charge you $5 a month. But if you're not, I think it's 10 or 12 a month or something. I think it's still a good deal either way. Mostly because how GeForce Now works is just an app, or now they have a web browser version, which I haven't tried, but I've heard good things. And it uses your existing games libraries. It's not like Google Stadia or the old OnLive service where you had to purchase the games separately and they exist only in the cloud and you can't do anything with them. So what I like a lot about GeForce Now is it uses all your existing game libraries on Steam or Epic, or Ubisoft Connect or whatever. It doesn't allow any game ever. When they were in beta, they were testing literally like any game ever, which was interesting. You could just load up a version of Steam and download whatever you wanted and try to play it. In some cases it wouldn't work, but in many cases it would. But then once they came out of beta, all these publishers complained, and a lot of games were pulled. Like all of Blizzard's games were pulled, Blizzard Activision specifically. What else? I don't know. A bunch of Total Wars and and Bethesda's entire catalog was pulled, which is actually pretty annoying. So there was a lot of games lost from the service, but there's still thousands available, including many popular ones. You can go play Destiny 2 or Fortnite or whatever, all kinds of things. But I've been very impressed with the service, not just from a non-native standpoint. I find it also a matter of convenience. Like I'm playing, back when the service had more support, I was playing Total War 2 at the time on my iMac, and I would go visit my sister on the weekend. She would go to bed early. I would play some games. And instead of trying, and it was just a puny MacBook Air. It couldn't run Total War. It would die. But she had good internet. I could just load up GeForce Now. And in most cases, the cloud saves work flawlessly, so you can just boot it up and play what you want. Even cooler, it also saves any and all mods you have enabled. Then I had a very heavily modded version of Total War going on, so I was just able to boot up GFN on my puny MacBook Air and just instantly load my save file right into my campaign, all my mods. So it's like really darn cool, actually, as a service. So, or even sometimes I'm back when I actually had more of a active Discord server in terms of gaming friends. Sometimes someone would want to play something I didn't have installed, and I didn't want to wait and download 30 gigs, 50 gigs, whatever. Hey, guess what? It's available on the streaming service. I just whip it up and play. Just like that, takes a minute or whatever. It is like a brief configuration the first time you load it, and ta-da, you're in.
About the mods you said there, I assume that only works for Steam Workshop mods and not...
Yes, correct. Yeah. I was going to clarify that. Additionally, it seems, although maybe a listener who uses the service may know and correct me, I haven't been able to actually configure the mods through GeForce Now. You have to have them configured locally first on either Mac or Windows, like through the Steam Workshop, and install them and configure them. Then upon loading GeForce Now, they just seem to work and be there. I haven't been able to load a game and add the mods there because it's all single instance. It's cloud-based, and it's just pulling like your local login. You have to log in to whatever you're using, Epic or Steam. just one time, and it saves it. Although I guess you could choose to log you out every time, I think, but that's annoying because I have two-factor authentication on both. And there actually was a time in the beta it asked me every single time I wanted to play a game, and that was a real hassle. But it doesn't do that anymore. But I found the service to be very reliable in terms of internet quality. There's even, if you don't want to pay for it, you can just use it for free for 1 hour sessions. Although if it's a busy game or a busy time, you may have to wait for a rig to open up. And I have the buddy I mentioned who used the PC laptop. He's used it before, the free version. We were playing some Gloomhaven Digital. And he's only had to ever wait a few minutes to get in. And sometimes it says wait time, like 20 or 30 minutes, but 2 or 3 minutes later, he pops up and he's in. Side note, I'm kind of rambling about this service and largely praising it because I do think it's very good for a variety of reasons. Even if you pay for it, you don't actually get unlimited time. What you do get is 6-hour sessions. So if you need, like, if that bothers you, well, you probably have a problem. Like, if you're gaming more than 6 hours at a time, you should go take a break, go eat, go walk, go do, that's how you, like, keel over and die. Yeah, so.
Well, okay. So I generally agree with that, but there is a little caveat that something I've noticed my brother doing a lot is that he'll leave his PlayStation or whatever running with a game while he leaves it and does other things. And then just like randomly come back to it and leave it again and things like that. So that might actually be a problem.
Well, yeah, no, it's true. It's good to bring it up because actually, if you're inactive for more than 5 minutes, it actually just closes your session.
Okay.
Or maybe
so
it's
you can't
10.
do games where you AFK for resources and things
like that. No. I mean, if you just come back and like wiggle your mouse, it's fine. But if there's like literally zero, it takes no input for 5 minutes, it does pop up with like, hey, are you still there? Like it does. I've come back before, like, oh, I'm going to grab water and a bio break or whatever and come back and it's like popping up at me. I'm like, no, I'm here. But every now and then I've come back, half an hour later and it's just, it saves your spot exactly where you are. It doesn't like just quit the game and lose your progress. It saves the game first, or of course some games are checkpoints, so in which case you revert to a checkpoint. But if the game can be saved, it just saves it there and boop, closes your session. So some caveats. And there's other services, as long as we're talking about it, Google Stadia, similar idea, it's meant to pipe in 1080p. I forgot to talk about that. In most cases, all these services are meant to play games on high settings, like sometimes ultra, depending on the game. So that's the benefit of it. You can have an old computer or even a new computer, whatever. You don't want to deal with these. Some games get ludicrously big these days, 100, 200 gigs or whatever. If you don't want to deal with that or hard drive space or anything, just boop, pop it, as long as you're in it, it's good. Pop it up and just stream it. Stadia takes a different approach, though, where you have to buy the games on Stadia. They're exclusive to the platform. I don't know what the benefit is, other than, like, there's no benefit to the gamer, to the user, like you or I, other than you have to rebuy your games, and that's pesky. And then, well, anything you play on there is isolated to that Stadia environment. It can't be, on Geforce Now. In most cases, there's occasional problems with the cloud saves. I could play a game first there. Like I was even playing Borderlands 3 back. I was playing it on Boot Camp when it came out, and I tried it on Geforce Now. It later got pulled, the Mac version game. But I was able to just use my saves either way, back and forth. And I've had that with a lot of games. Either which way, either first playing on Geforce Now, and then later a Mac version even, and boop, my saves are just there on Steam. But anything with Stadia, like I would never use it for that reason. Everything's isolated to that environment, which is pesky. I will say quickly, I'm rambling a lot about these services. The quality of Stadia I found actually be a little better than Geforce Now, and maybe they have some more better dedicated hardware, or somehow the games being exclusive are somehow better piped in. I don't really know. Of course, maybe it's just different tech because they're not the same companies. And you can also use Stadia just through a browser, and of course they have a whole hardware package you can buy. I think it gets piped to your TV, and they have its own controller, so it's more of a like console couch setup-y thingy, I guess, is Google Stadia's thing. But consoles aren't that expensive, so because you not only do you have to pay for the games, you have to pay for a monthly subscription on top of that for Stadia. So to me personally, it's a very unattractive option. I'm not much of a console gamer, but if I was going that route, I would just buy a console.
Didn't Stadia have a free tier as well? Like you still have to buy the games, isn't there a free tier for the streaming
I'm
subscription?
not sure about that because they've also changed their packages and prices a few times. I know they've offered some free trials, though I don't know if those trials are just permanent. I think they've been windows, kind of like these free weekends you get on Steam or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's cool for a variety of reasons. One, it's again, it basically, if you're going to play a non-native game, of course, the game has to be supported on one of these streaming services because it's not a blanket anything and everything playable. A lot of things are, some things aren't. But it's, yeah, I find it really convenient to save downloading games or to play it on a separate lower end system, or if you're traveling and a good net, it can work. The cross saves mostly work. The mods mostly work in terms of Steam Workshop. So I think it's pretty cool. I've played quite a few games on there lately, not so much. This year I've been played a bunch of I think Vermintide 2, and I was playing a little like Witcher 3, a little Killing Floor 2. My buddy got big into Apex Legends, so I don't like the game at all, but he like bugs me to play. So instead of putting it in boot camp, I just load it up through GFN and, hop in for a few sessions or whatever. So, and what I wonder, to switch the conversation a little bit, although before I do that, have you guys used any streaming services before, or are you just kind of aware of them in general?
No, I've never.
I mean, I've used Geforce Now for one game. When my last iMac died, I wanted to continue playing Final Fantasy, and my laptop couldn't run it, so I just used Geforce Now for that. But what I found interesting about that was, well, one thing, as you said, it had the cloud save, so it just picked up and continued exactly where it was on my iMac, which is cool. But even though the game ran at like high settings, higher than I had it running on my last iMac as well, I think it looked worse because of compression for the video stream. And I have pretty decent internet. I think it's like 300 megabits or something like that. Right. So it's not a network bandwidth problem, at least. But it didn't look quite as good to me.
Yeah,
I'm not a visual snob either.
Yeah, sure. No, I've seen that because I follow also the GFN Reddit and some other forums. Apparently, some people complain about that, and it seems to be their distance to a data center. I'm fairly near one. It's over just
that would make sense.
It's pretty nearby, and I think in Europe the data centers are a little more spread out because it's a USA-based company. But it's true. Some games I've had just be like crystal clear, like you couldn't even tell. In other games, it looks simultaneously looks really good, but also slightly worse, like you were just saying, because of the compression. And occasionally, or if your internet blips, or maybe on GFN blips, you will get like a brief like TV fuzzy on your screen, and then like whoop, everything clears up again. Sometimes you get a few seconds of that. So there are caveats to the service. Absolutely, it's not a flawless 10 out of 10. Must use. There are some issues, or there could be issues with either your internet or your distance to a data center, because then you have the compression could be worse. But seeing as it's free and it's very quick to download and just sign up for a quick NVIDIA account, or you may already have one, I recommend people check it out if you haven't, because it's just free. You can just use it. And if you were to be time yourself or whatever, you could just play an hour sessions and then log out and log back in and keep playing. It warns you with this little timer at the top of the screen, like your session will end in 10 minutes and then 5 minutes, and then it ticks down like the last minute. So like you have time to stop, save, do whatever, or I won't go do this long quest. My session's about to be over. I'll save and log out or whatever. But seeing as it's free, if anyone listening hasn't checked it out or sounds interesting based on what we've talked about it, go have a peek. Could be worth your time.
Yeah, something I also think is really cool about it is if you're on a mobile device like a laptop, it's going to be a lot lighter on the battery than running games natively. So you're going to have way longer battery life doing a streaming thing like this, which is an advantage to streaming that, might go a bit unnoticed if you just read about it or think about it. Like one good thing is you can run games you probably don't have the hardware for, but there's also that battery aspect that you can run them for longer than if you were running them on a mobile device like that, even if you could run it.
That is a terrific point. The original, like the the marketing target market or whatever, I believe, was primarily people, not just Mac users. It's also available on PC. And there's plenty of people who don't have mega powerful PCs to run the latest and greatest AAA stuff. It's just a little more prevalent in the Mac space, that's all. Or maybe a lot more. But still, the point is users exist on both sides. And I've seen plenty of PC users in the forums and places also saying, wow, this service is great. And I don't have a high-end Mac, or it's great for friends or travel, or battery life's a great point. Yeah, because, all those nice battery life numbers you get from Apple or whoever, none of that. They're all for like listening to music or watching Netflix or whatever. Like that's all they gauge it for. You crank up a heavier game, your battery's going to drain way faster. Yeah, so that's a great point. The last service to mention, seeing as we're talking about it, there's Amazon's Luna, which I had a beta invite for somehow, and it was terrible. I didn't try it more than like 5 minutes, so I can't recommend that. And I've heard some good things about this Xbox PC Game Pass, Xbox blah blah. There's Xbox like 10 times in all their titles. It trips me up.
I think the cloud offering is called xCloud.
xCloud, okay.
I think so. The Game Pass, I think, is for like you pay a monthly fee or something, and then you actually get the games for like download and play locally. But the streaming service is called xCloud.
You're
I think
correct.
That's how it works.
I believe you're right. I think they have a client, but that's Windows only. But I believe there's some sort of browser version you can just use. Yeah. I believe
you can use a browser. Yeah.
But I believe you need a controller because it's all console games, Xbox games. So from what I've read, I don't believe it's mouse and keyboard compatible. You do need a controller, but apparently it works with whatever I assume an Xbox controller, obviously. I have no idea if it works. Yeah, I have no idea if it works with like a PS3, 4, 5, whatever controller on that particular service. I don't know. I'm not a controller guy. GFN all supports controllers, and to talk about GFN a little more and praise it. It has some other cool stuff like you can press a button or a Control G or whatever that it tells you what it is, and it'll clip like the last 10 or 30 seconds of your game. Like it's always saving it basically, and anytime you hit the command, it then like clips it, and it has a couple other sort of these like save the moment or share the moment features, and a bunch of peripheral support, and you can go in and adjust the settings. If you have a bandwidth cap on your internet, and you have to worry about limits per month, you can go in and actually change the settings, and it tells you like how much data it'll use per hour and stuff like that. And it can be like data saver or unlimited or whatever. It has 3 or 4 different options. So that's cool too. You can tweak around. And there's also, I think, some experimental toggles for like direct mouse input and USB peripherals and this and that. So it's not bad at all. It's a little more customizable than you'd think. It's not just like click game, that's it. One last thing, and then I will stop talking about GFN. But I do like the service. This was a review. I'd probably give it like a 9 out of 10. I think it's a really good service. But it auto-configs a lot of games to like high or ultra. Every now and then, though, I've noticed it for some reason, it puts them on like medium. And I'm like, well, that's silly. So I just go into the settings and I change all the settings higher, and the game's fine. It doesn't like downgrade the streaming or something. The game just looks better and still plays at the same FPS. So that's a funny thing. If you think the game doesn't look as good as it like should based on what they're claiming, well, just go check the game settings. It might, for some reason, just be lower, and you should be able to just bump them up. So that's something funny I've found. Yeah. So
it might just be like roasts in the glasses, but the way I remember it, I actually think OnLive, that was what it was called, wasn't it? OnLive.
Yep.
I think it actually worked better for me, even though on paper it shouldn't have, because GeForce has way more resources for both hardware and infrastructure probably, but the way I recall it, OnLive worked super well, and I didn't feel like I had that good an experience with Geforce Now. But there's nothing I can point to Geforce Now and say that didn't work that well, because it was all a fairly smooth experience, but there was something about it that didn't feel quite right. Maybe it was some input lag or something that was just messing in the back of my head without me really being able to say that's the problem, right?
I had that experience with 1 or 2 games. Actually, is when I was trying Diablo 3 because I didn't want to download it. My buddy wanted to play, PC buddy. So I tried it through GFN, and it was actually terrible, and it was weird. I don't know why. It was really, the compression was terrible. It was a kind of laggy and glitchy, and so that was honestly the only bad experience I can point to. And I have a pretty long list of games I've played through GFN over the years. I even have them saved, actually. Played all the newer Wolfenstein games, Doom, Vermintide 2, Dishonored, Shadow of War, a couple Assassin's Creed games, Black Ops 4, a couple other things, Control, World War Z. I don't know. It's just like, these are all like AAA games for the most part, and they ran great. Some of those aren't available.
I should mention as well for full disclosure that I only tried GeForce Now during the beta period, and I only played Final Fantasy 15 with it. And Final Fantasy 15 was one of those not officially supported titles where you mentioned I just had a Steam instance. And
right.
So, I'm not saying that you should judge GeForce Now based on the experience I'm portraying having had with them.
No, but it's true. If you go to the forums, some people do, or Reddit or whatever, some people do complain, I'm getting input lag. The game keeps compressing heavily on me. Like, what's going on? Is my internet's stable? And so, your experience, your mileage could vary, basically. I've had a very good experience with it consistently over time, over years, with various games, but I have seen people complain of some semi-regular issues. So basically, you just got to check it out. It is free on the hourly sessions and see what you get, basically. But it could be a nice, even if you don't use it heavily, it could just be this nice extra thing you use on the side, or jump into a game for an hour where, that you don't want to download, or there's tons of free-to-play games through Steam you can just check out on there. Or like in some cases, I just use it as a demo platform. And if I like it enough, I might even then go get a Mac version, or even go and get it like the PC version, depending on what the game is, then play it off streaming if I really want to, or maybe tinker around with it or whatever. So it can basically has a wide variety of uses to the streaming service, which is neat. GeForce Now specifically, Stadia, you got to buy the games, and I don't even think it offers demos the way OnLive did. Which is
I really like that about OnLive. That was really nice.
My favorite thing about it. One of my favorite things about it. The other one was you could just go and watch anyone else playing games, and it had this really cool, like, huge grid of just whatever people were playing. You could just click or scroll over it, and it just zooms in, load, ta-da, and you're just spectating them. It was really cool. It was like on live TV. I wish it felt cool. It was really cool. I think they were ahead of their time, basically, and didn't. Back then everything was 720p only. Could get pretty grainy. And the games were exclusive to OnLive. You had to have separate your own versions. I got lucky enough to, back when I was writing for Inside Mac Games, I actually called them up on the phone and was like, hey, I want to interview someone. I'm a writer for Inside Mac Games. And somehow I got a hold of someone on the phone, and they're like, oh, cool. And they're like, hey, do you just want an all access dev pass? And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. So then I could just literally play anything I wanted on OnLive through some... Just they added it to my account, and then I did a couple interviews with them on the site, and then I tried to review a game, Kane and Lynch 2, actually, and there was a huge uproar from the Inside Mac Games community. I was practically stoned, basically, for doing a non-Mac game review on Inside Mac Games, right? It was what do you call it? Heresy. Treachery. It was very unfavorably received. But the editor approved it and everything. He's like, sure, let's give it a try. And then he's like, okay, no more of those. Yeah. But shout out to OnLive, the OG streaming service. Rip them. They went bankrupt or something like a year or two. They started, I think, in 2011, and in 2012 or 13 they were out. But streaming's everywhere now. I don't want the whole thing to be about streaming, though. What do you guys think, starting with Ted, about non-native gaming in general? Like, again, Boot Camp or Wine or Crossover, which you didn't talk about much yet. Streaming, do you think all these options being available on the Mac hurts, developers wanting to port their games to the Mac? What do you feel about that?
It's a good question. I don't really have an opinion on that. It always seemed to me that only the top-notch AAA games got ported to the backside. And, if they, I really don't know. It's just not one of those things that I'm really aware of. I would think that they might think twice about doing a port if they knew a lot of people were, playing, say, using Boot Camp or something like that, on the Mac side. But I don't know if they would even know that. And
right.
Typically, I will, if I know a Mac version is going to come out, I would just wait for it anyhow. Back before I was retired, I had very limited time to play games, so I would, one Mac game came out and I would play it to death until I got sick and tired of it or something new came along, and which worked really well for me, and it was good because most of the games that got over were really good. But honestly, I don't know. I do see the Apple's constant changing of the rules for their computers, which seems to me, and this is just my opinion, that it would be a deterrent for a developer because, this game will work now, and then the next time Apple makes a change, like the change we did from the 32 bits or the change we did when we left Classic, or now the change that we've had going to Apple Silicon, that means different work. And then since I'm not a developer, I really don't know what that's involved. I mean, is it a matter of plugging it into a machine, a program that they get and spitting out an M1 versus, the Intel version for the Mac, or is it a lot more complex? And I'm sure there's a lot more testing that's involved. So that maybe, but I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't have data, like actual data on that, or some like no devs who have told me anything or anything like that. I'm just curious. Yeah, what our opinions are on this, basically.
Yeah.
What do you think, Casper?
First, a quick little comment on that last part from Ted with the process involved. If your code doesn't make any assumptions about the underlying hardware, you can just take your source code, put it into the compiler. That's the program that converts source code written for humans like C, C++, Swift, whatever, into machine code. Plug your code into the compiler, and out pops an M1 native version. But some code will make assumptions about the underlying hardware that might not be true on an M1 platform, but is true on an Intel platform, and then you have compatibility issues when you just do that. But for a lot of code, it is just a matter of recompiling. Not all code, but for a lot of code. That's my quick comment on that first. But going to the actual question, I think we're looking at a bit of a chicken and egg inside of a catch-22. Because if we just imagine a world where people who have Macs don't install Boot Camp, like nobody does it. They don't, to play games at least. Nobody uses crossover, nobody uses streaming, anything like that. We only play games that come out on the Mac platform natively. Game developers might look at that and go, well, Mac players don't care enough about games, so we're not going to develop the games. On the other hand, if we do all these things, we use crossover, we use Boot Camp, we use streaming services extensively to play all our games, the attitude might instead be, oh, they play our games anyway, so there's no need for us to give them a native version.
Right.
So, it's kind of like, it might be one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of things, right?
Right.
But I think
point.
that the best thing for the ecosystem is to indicate that we are here, that we are an existing community of people who care about games, who also want to use a Mac computer. And if that means that we use Boot Camp or whatever, I don't think that hurts the Mac ecosystem for games, because I think as much as it does that damage of, oh, they don't need a native port, it also indicates that we exist as a community in the first place, the people who care about games.
And we're out there looking and buying and playing these kinds of games that are common on PC or certain consoles. Still, there's some exclusive console games, but a lot of them make their way to PC now.
And I think that has more value than saying we are purists and only play macOS native games. That might just indicate a lack of interest, right?
Right. I really like that. Yeah. I really like how you posed that. I would also agree with you there on what you just said. I think the greater benefit is, yeah, we are a community of gamers. And yeah, being purist is maybe back in the day worked, maybe like 2000, maybe around like 1999 through 2004. It was kind of like a golden era. There was just heaps of games and all kinds of stuff, and tons of AAA stuff came over and all. Anyway, well, then it really changed. So, yeah, I don't think it does any. I was a purist back in the day, but that was just like a random pride thing for no particular reason, just because, really. And I think that mostly existed in like the Bungie era. It was like, haha, I've got Marathon, and haha, I've got Myth, or Ambrosia Software had like Escape Velocity, but these games then started getting ported to PC because they were so popular and there was demand. And these games were cool enough that people were like, hey, we want these games too. Kind of reverse situation. And then Bungie and Ambrosia and stuff started giving out PC versions of certain games, and of course now the situation's totally different, but that was just like random teenage pride or whatever, because I was however old I was back then, 14 or something, 16, whatever. So no reason other than because at this point it's more that, as you were saying, I would prefer to play things on Mac first, but in the end we're all gamers here and we want to have fun and play the games we want to play, or play them with whether friends, family, strangers, whoever it is. And the technology is so good these days, there's so many different ways you can play those games. Natively, non-natively, we didn't talk much about, really at all, about Wine and Crossover, or Play on Mac, which I don't even know who makes it. Some sort of free version of Wine that's a little more put together. Crossover is really cool, though, by Code Weavers. I do want to shout them out, because I have done some work, like interviews with them way back. They did give me some access, like a year free access to Crossover. I did play a number of games through it, and they worked surprisingly well. So it's kind of the thing about Mac gaming. There's no like one aspect of it that covers everything, because like native Mac gaming covers a lot, but only so much. If you want to go to streaming, covers a lot, but not everything. If you want to go, I guess if you go to Boot Camp, you can basically play anything, but then Boot Camp's the most hassle out of all these services to configure and install and reboot and blah, 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 and you need the hardware for it. Crossover is really cool. It's not too hard to configure, though it can be, but there's a huge database on Codeweaver's website of basically supported games, and people have gone through and tested and rated them and gave them so many. I think they rate them by like medals, like bronze, silver, gold, or whatever. Basically anything silver will run pretty good with just a few bugs. And you'd be surprised at what might just even run really, really well. I mean, back then I was playing Skyrim, if I recall, works pretty much flawlessly, other than an occasional mouse bug or something. I played a bunch of before I knew Feral was porting them, the Dawn of War 2 series. I played all through Crossover. I played Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl through Crossover. What else? Fear 3, even multiplayer worked. Like, surprising amount of, at the time, they were like high-end AAA games. Now they're like old hat, but it works with a surprising amount of things, and it's a cool, like, open source, tight-knit, work-together community. A lot of people share. You can go and, like, I actually solved a few bugs with the Dawn of War games I was pretty proud of, and I went and posted them to the forums, and some black screen bug I, discovered, and they have community ambassadors. There's like this whole scene around Crossover and Wine. It's a pretty cool community. I'm only like scratched the surface of it, but they love to tinker, they love to help each other out, and I think you can run a lot more than I think you'd be surprised how many things you can run through Wine, basically, or even how well. I think a lot of people have been doing stuff like running Witcher 3 through Crossover, even on M1s and stuff like that. Of course, at this point, it's a 2015 game, but it's still considered like high-end, tip-top by a lot of people. So, Crossover's worth checking out too. You do have to pay for it, but Wine itself is free. If you're a tinkerer, you can just go and tinker. There's this Play on Mac thing, which I've tried before. It's kind of in between. It's more of a Crossover idea, like it's an actual app and it's supposed to pre-configure stuff for you, but it is free, so it's less fully featured, blah, blah, blah.
Regarding the open source thing, I just want to clarify that while Wine itself is an open source project, So Codeweaver's products are not entirely open source. What they do with I forgot the Crossover. That's the other product. So what they do with Crossover is that they fork Wine. They make their own UI, which is proprietary, and they make tweaks to Wine specifically for the targeting platform and optimizing certain things. And then they claim that 95% of their code goes back upstream into the open source version of Wine. So they do contribute back to the project they forked it from, but not everything that is Crossover is open source.
Right. That's an excellent point. Thank you for clarifying that. Crossover is paid, but they do have a free trial. I think it's 2 weeks. So you can go and check it out. They have a Silicon version now. So you got an M1 or an Intel. It'll work either way. 2-week trial. And again, you can go to their website. Huge list of games. I think they even added... I think at this point, back when I was using it, they didn't even have DirectX 11 or 11, 10, whatever it is they use now, past 9. They only had DX9 support, so I can only play DX9 games. I believe now they support DX11, so you can play even more games. So that's pretty cool. Worth checking out.
If I'm not mistaken, it's actually kind of funny with that DX11 support, because what I believe happened, and I'm doing this kind of off memory, so if I'm wrong on the details, don't berate me for it. But what I think is happening is actually that they translate from DirectX 11 into Vulkan, and then from Vulkan into Metal. So you go through several hoops there, but performance still seems to be pretty decent.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, that's a funny thing. We did have a actually from the Mac Rumors forum request to talk about more like Vulkan and a couple other things, but I think we'll have to save that for another episode because this one's already probably should be wrapping it up soon because we're trying to keep our episodes a little shorter. We've been going a bit long. But that is on our minds. We will maybe when Sam comes back, when he's available, we'll have sort of a more technically podcast on porting and Vulkan and basically all these things, APIs essentially, whether that's Metal or Vulkan or DirectX or whatever. We could kind of have some talk about that. Even some history would be interesting. OpenGL and so on and so forth. We can have a whole podcast all about that. I think could be fun. Also, essentially, there's a listener request. I think even there was someone on IMG forums may have mentioned it as well. That could be interesting. So we can do that. It's kind of related to the subject, but not directly. But it's on our minds. The last thing I just want to bring up in terms of this non-native thing is virtualization, which is primarily through Parallels. There is also Fusion. I don't even know if at this point they're the same company or different. I think they're different companies.
VMware is the company behind Fusion. And they do a lot of workstation level and server level infrastructure in general, not just Mac OS Windows support, but they have a whole business focusing on Linux specifically as well.
Right.
VMware is actually a pretty big company inside the virtualization space, where Parallel is more Mac focused.
I see. Thank you for adding that detail because I was unaware of that. But I think Parallels has more gamey support, or at least more pre-config for it, because you can choose like, why are you installing Parallels in Windows? And I want to play games, and it auto-configures some stuff for more game-based rather than PC, work apps or whatever it is, or stuff like that. So yeah, the virtualization is much more used in the work world, as far as I know, all kinds of development and IT and things like that. But the support is pretty solid for games. Once again, though, like Wine, a AAA game may run great. Witcher 3 runs great, for example, in Parallels, actually like really well. If you have enough resources, it's a resource hog, the virtualization. Need a lot of RAM and GPU and everything. But I think there's also a Silicon version now for Parallels, and again, the M1's way overperforming, can run things that you wouldn't expect, even virtualized or through crossover. But then I installed some random little indie game, like One Finger Death Punch. It's this funny little side scroller. It's all of like 100 megabytes. It could probably run on like 20-year-old computer. Not quite, but it's like very basic. But it wouldn't launch through Parallels, just gain some random gibberish Windows error. I have no idea what it means, and I'm even pretty good at troubleshooting errors and getting games to run and tweaking files and workarounds, and I just couldn't do it. So I'm like, this will run. It's this tiny indie game. Of course it'll run. And then it errored. I'm like, darn it. So again, your mileage may vary in Parallels. Again, it's a paid service. Again, they have a trial. I believe it's 2 weeks. So if you're going to try and dip your toes or dive into these non-native waters, there's trials for almost all of them anyway. GFN's free, Stadia isn't, Luna's in beta, whatever. But in terms of crossover or Parallels, it's there's all free trials, and of course, Boot Camp is free beyond the price of a Windows license. So,
I mean, technically, you don't even need a Windows license if you don't want to customize your background and things like that.
Yeah,
you can actually just install Windows without a license and play games, and it's totally valid. What you will have is a tiny little bit of text in the bottom right corner that says Windows isn't activated, but that's it.
Right. That's an excellent detail. So Boot Camps, if you don't mind that, it's also based, and I think it bugs you because
it bugs you sometimes too. Yeah,
it pops.
Yeah.
It'll pop up. So if you're willing to tolerate those little nuisances or whatever, you can do a lot on your Mac, and I think a lot more than you think. So depending on what kind of gamer you are, what you want to explore, if you're unaware of any of these services or options, go check them out because it's a pretty big gaming world out there within our Macs, beyond just the native space, which we all prefer, but there's tons more games and experiences out there to check out as well.
2 quick comments I have on things we've sort of brushed over. One thing is that you mentioned the hassle level or the amount of effort to do something, right? And while it's true that Boot Camp does require a full system reboot, and that can be a bit annoying and things like that, it is by far the most reliable and hassle-free approach in terms of, I just want it to work when I double-click the icon, right?
Right.
You need to reboot, you need to install Windows fully on your Mac, go through all that hassle. And in terms of all that, it's a bigger hassle than crossover, when crossover works perfectly. But it's not always going to work perfectly. And there will be times where you'll need to tinker with a lot of things to get all of these other solutions to work well. And Boot Camp is just going to work because it is Windows running natively on your Mac or your Mac hardware.
Yeah. Once you're past the initial hurdle, I absolutely agree. It's just the reboot time, which on an SSD now, which practically every computer is.
I was just going to say,
so fast. It's like 30 seconds in Windows, and you can. What did I do? I just auto logged in your user, so it just reboot. Zoop, you're just right in your Windows desktop, 30 seconds later or whatever. And like you said, double click, boom, you're opening whatever game. I think the last thing I boot camped was Anthem, now a canceled / sort of failed game. Back then, it was all the rage, and it was really cool. And I still had a lot of fun with it. But I absolutely agree. That's a great point. If it takes a couple hours usually to partition, install, configure, blah blah blah, get past that hurdle, Boot Camp is actually basically the best option if you're willing to deal with that. Yeah.
But also another thing is that, so we talked about that sort of getting developers on board with native versions, and whether they feel the incentive is there if we just boot camp it anyway. So while I will reboot into Windows for games that I care about, if I just scroll through the list of new games in Steam or something like that, and I see something that's mildly interesting, maybe I haven't heard about it before, but it looks interesting, I might want to try it out. If it doesn't have a macOS native port, I might just go, I don't want to reboot into Windows. I have all these open windows.
Good point.
I'll just play something else. So I still think that there is that, lost market share in that sense. Even if we're willing to reboot into Windows or go through crossover or whatever for titles we care deeply about, if we are just scrolling through a list and you don't have a Mac version, we might still just pass because it is still more hassle than a native version.
Yeah, that's a great point, the accessibility. And I've experienced that recently. I mean, part of it's because I have this backlog and I'm trying not to buy new games, but every now and then I'll buy a new game anyway because it's something I really like, especially if it has a Mac version. But occasionally, recently, same thing, scrolling through, and this cool cyberpunk RPG came out, not Cyberpunk 2077. I think it was just called The Ascent.
Yeah,
this top-down. And I'm like, this looks really cool. I want to play it. I have to boot camp it. In fact, I don't even have boot camp installed. I was so interested in it. I'm like, I'll install Boot Camp for this game. It's really cool. And I can then finish my Dishonored 2 playthrough, which I'm halfway through and everything. But then, I'm busy and this and that. And I have other games already on the Mac side I'm playing. I don't know, what am I playing right now? Still finishing Metro Exodus. And I was tinkering around with some other games, Frostpunk and Metropolis and Desperados 3 and blah, blah, blah. So in the end, that accessibility won, and I didn't buy the game. It's still on my wish list.
Yeah.
But if I already had Boot Camp installed, I'd probably just have bought it and be playing it. If it had a Mac version, absolutely, I would have just bought it and already played it. So
I basically had the same experience with that game. So they've lost 2 sales at least on us.
Oh.
I had friends actually text me going, "Hey, come join us. We're playing The Ascent." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And looked it up, and I might get this. Oh, no Mac version. I don't want to reboot just for this.
I should tweet the developers when this episode goes live.
Yeah.
2 pre-orders sitting here available. Port now, please. Thanks.
Port, please. I have to. One other thing I want to point out on me too. A lot of the games that I've been doing on the Windows side are older ones that I didn't get a chance to play that never did come over to the Mac side. I mean, like I'm playing Dead Space 3 with my brother. We played the Wolfenstein Youngblood together. But those, again, those are older games. And if something new comes out, I will wait to see if there's any news about a Mac version, because I agree it's a lot easier just to click on the game on the Mac rather than do the reboot. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point. Not Mac, but shout out to Wolfenstein Youngblood. I also played that through with a friend, and it's a terrible single player game, but it's a really
terrible
co-op game.
It's wonderful co-op. It's designed that way. Yeah.
It's weird how atrociously bad it is single player, but how really solid it is co-op. It makes no sense, but somehow it's true.
The AI on the other character is just atrocious.
It is.
When you're playing when you're playing with single, but when you have someone else playing it, they don't do stupid things like go chasing off after something. No. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Fun game for Wolfenstein fans. And fun fact, even though Bethesda's entire catalog got pulled from GFN, Youngblood for some reason is still there. I think they must have a some sort of contract with them because it's also RTX enabled. I forgot to mention that for GFN. If you pay for the service, you also get ray tracing capable machines for any game that supports it. But if you use the free version, you don't. So Youngblood is one of those. I think it was basically like a RTX demo, essentially. It's not literally a demo, but like showcase would be the word. So for some reason, Youngblood's still there. And if you go in GFN and type in RTX, it'll show a list in the search bar. It'll show a list of all RTX supported games, which is cool. But yeah, side note on that for Youngblood. I just wanted to shout it out because I did rather enjoy it. It has like terrible reviews on Steam. It's like mixed or even negative, but that's because everyone, rightfully so, expected it to be a good single player experience like all the other previous games forever. And this one added multiplayer co-op, and everyone's like, WTF, and this is horrible. But it's actually very solid co-op. Yeah.
Very solid, yeah.
Yeah, pretty fun. And yeah, so no Mac support, but it is through GFN. Can be played with RTX if you pay for it. And it does look pretty nice with the RTX on, I gotta say. Yeah, that's cool. But that'll wrap us up, gents. Native versus non-native gaming. I think we covered a lot of interesting points. I also really liked Casper's angle on how developers might perceive it, like the catch-22 chicken and the egg thing. Yeah, good stuff. Good thoughts. Any other closing comments on the subject? No, we're good. We're also at
we have a lot of good options, but please give us native ports still.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like Ted said, ports please.
Yes. That's the catchphrase for the ports please.
Ports please. Yeah. Okay, gents, appreciate it. Another fantastic episode. Thanks to you guys, and thanks for listening, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
A big thank you to Kevin McLeod for the intro and outro music. Be sure to check out his library on the web. You can find more episodes of our show on our website, macgamecast.com, or in all major podcast directories. If you enjoy the show, please consider commenting, following, or sharing. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.